Good evening, and welcome to the January 2019 edition of League of Women Voters Presents, the monthly public affairs show about insights and issues that are important to mid-Missouri and beyond. My name's Randy Picht. I'm your host. I'm the executive director of the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute at the Missouri School of Journalism. And tonight we're going to talk about a hot button issue that is something that you can be kind of on one side or the other, and I think there are some good folks that are trying to find some middle ground on this issue. It's gun safety. It's gun violence prevention, and we have two guests that are going to be able to tell us all about some of the things they've been up to here in mid-Missouri. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, so take it away.
I'm Kristin Bowen. I'm the local group leader for Moms Demand Action here in Columbia. I'm a volunteer leader for the group, and I founded it in 2015.
Okay.
And I'm Katie Terry. I'm the communications lead for our local group. And I joined maybe 6 months or so after Kristin started Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Columbia chapter.
And so let's start with how did we get here? How did we get Moms Demand Action? Where did that come from?
Moms Demand Action is a national organization. We are the largest grassroots organization of this kind working on gun violence prevention. It was started in December of 2012, the day after the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, by a stay-at-home mother, Shannon Watts, who actually coincidentally is a Mizzou alumna. She graduated from Mizzou as an undergraduate. But she was at home watching, as many of us were, horrified at the tragedy unfolding in Newtown, and went online immediately to say, how can I get involved? Something has to be done. And went to Facebook and found nothing. And so she started the group the very next day as a Facebook group. So we had our origins in social media. And we've grown since then, after 5+ years, to about 5 million grassroots supporters nationwide. We've got chapters in every state and local groups in states like Missouri, in every corner, rural and urban. We are, as I said, the largest group devoted to working on this issue as a grassroots organization.
And one thing I would say about the organization, we're not just moms. We're moms, dads, parents, grandparents, people with and without children. It's anyone who cares about safety in our society. And something else that's compelling to me, and I think others about moms, is we're an action-based organization. So you can donate money, but you don't give money to become a member. You become a supporter by taking an action to help the movement, whether that's attending a local meeting, writing to your legislators, following a post on social media. Any action that you take that moves the organization forward is how you're considered a supporter. So those are the kinds of things we do.
And our name, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, I think originally the thought was it's modeled on Mothers Against Drunk Driving, right, which in a very similar way took a grassroots approach to persuading both lawmakers but also schools and corporations and other and individuals of the urgency of making change on the issue. So we sort of think of our name as modeled on the Mothers Against Drunk Driving name, but we, as Katie said, we're not just moms. Everyone's welcome to join, and of course, as part of our group now, since last year, we also include students, and Students Demand Action is sort of our sister brother organization.
And so you mentioned lawmakers, talking to lawmakers. That's probably an important part of what these groups do around the country. Maybe talk a little bit about where things stand now in terms of the politics and the partisanship and all that stuff.
Well, we can talk about elections and legislative work for many hours, since that was our priority all fall. We worked really hard to help elect gun sense candidates in the elections. And nationally, Moms Demand Action candidates won big. As you know, the Congress has now got a majority of gun sense lawmakers in the House. And here in Missouri, we didn't elect our candidates as many as we would have liked, but we participated in all of that national push for gun sense candidates nationally. And so it was not only on the national level in states as well. And for the first time, we had moms volunteers themselves running in huge numbers, and were part of that big successful push for women in both national and state government positions. Lucy McBath in Georgia is the sort of most well-known moms volunteer who ran for and won her seat in Congress. So
And her son was murdered and was the subject of a documentary, 3.5 minutes, 9 bullets, or 3.5 seconds. What was it? Something. There's a movie about her son, and she and Shannon Watts are very close. They were actually together behind Nancy Pelosi yesterday when the House introduced House Bill 8 to make background checks universal in this country. So it was a huge, huge moment for moms,
Right.
And the movement in gun violence prevention in this country just felt like finally a seismic shift in getting Washington and other state legislatures off the mark.
right, so
Well, and the House of Representatives, certainly, they didn't waste any time
Right.
in
I think
identifying this as an important issue.
Nancy,
right.
the speaker said it would be, and candidates ran on it, and I think they fulfilled their promise, and she said that yesterday
And
at the
I
podium.
think the candidates all felt the work of all of the grassroots volunteers that were all across the country working for them and speaking to them and pushing for this to be an issue that we vote on, and making that sort of foremost in people's minds. I mean, we had an incredible amount of work done in our state, and not just locally, but in Cape Girardeau and Cass County, all over the state in the elections.
St. Louis.
And it's
Amazing.
remarkable how many volunteers we were able to motivate based on this issue. People need to see that lawmakers are responding to the concerns that we have, that we need to see change. So,
And so you mentioned that in Missouri, maybe the results weren't what you hoped, but so part of this is a national issue, but
Right.
also part of it is how each state's going to pass laws or handle it. And
right.
how does the group handle that kind of? One state can be very progressive, another state maybe not so much.
Right. We work as
Yeah.
a state together. So one of the wonderful things about being a volunteer with this group, I find, is that we coordinate with local groups all across the state and work as one chapter. And we're somewhat unique among grassroots organizations in that we work on that national level, but we also work on state level policy and legislation and elections work. So we, as soon as the elections were over, pivoted to start thinking about the Missouri legislative session, which is just getting underway. And we know that we need to go back. We are facing some of the same bills, same sort of pro-gun lobby bills are being pre-filed and presented for this session that were presented last year. So we know we need to go back and do that same work that we did last year to push back against those terrible bills that would put guns in more sensitive places. For example, our big effort last year was to push back against something called Guns Everywhere, which would have put guns into places like hospitals, bars, college campuses, and daycares. And we were very fortunate last year in that bill did not go across the finish line, but we're very aware that it's coming back. So we do coordinate with our volunteers in all of the other parts of the state. We go to the Capitol with them. We coordinate on who to talk to, who's sort of going to be our next ally, who might be persuadable to have a meeting with us and help us think about how to go with our strongest case into hearings or behind the scenes. It's a lot of legislative work.
It is, and one thing I would say is, so when Shannon founded Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, she actually were under the umbrella of Everytown for Gun Safety, which is something that Michael Bloomberg started. It originated with Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and now it's sort of an umbrella organization. And so one of the things that also we find compelling about Moms Demand Action is that we're a research-based organization, and every town provides that research for us. And so they have people in Washington and in New York City following bills in Missouri, and they let us know when they're filed, and they provide talking points, and they really equip us on the ground to be advocates and intelligent spokespeople for the gun violence prevention
So
movement.
research-based, what does that mean?
That's a great question. So
Yeah, it is
when
a
we
good
talk
question.
to people, everyone feels like they already have a position on this issue, right? We're all touched by it when there's a mass public event, and we're moved by the tragedy, and we have different responses, and people say, well, what are you going to do, right? So what we bring to this conversation, what we hope when we share in meetings with lawmakers or with a neighbor that we run into at the grocery store, is positions that we can say are informed by actual research. So we rely heavily when we talk to lawmakers or when we invite people to come take an action with us on data, on actual numbers that affect the issue on the ground. And so we want to be seen as being resources for lawmakers. So we take really seriously that we need to come prepared with that information. So for example, this year we're hoping to be talking to lawmakers about a good piece of legislation that would protect families in domestic violence situations. And so we're looking at a lot. This has been sponsored a few times, but it hasn't progressed very far. But this year we're really hopeful that a domestic violence bill could be introduced and make it through committee that would help protect women in Missouri who currently have no protection if they're in a domestic situation where there's an abuser and a firearm. A few years ago, I think it was 2016, as a result of the permitless carry law that passed in our state, the ability for local sheriffs to intervene in one of those situations and remove firearms from those homes was eliminated from statute. It's a huge gaping loophole that affects our families and has increased the number of incidents in our state. And so what we would do in those situations where we're having conversations with lawmakers is we can talk about that. We can provide them research studies. We always come, in fact, I've got in my hands a folder that we're preparing to share with lawmakers just this week on this issue. And we can say, look, these are the numbers in St. Louis County. We can see the
23%
right.
increase in the murder rate after permitless carry was enacted in St. Louis alone.
So there,
So that's what you mean by being able to say,
Facts and
you don't have to
figures.
listen to me, look at my,
right. Because
Right,
we're
and
not
all their fact sheets are
Right.
documented, right?
it's
there-
a
there's-
strength that we're volunteers. We're not
Okay.
policy wonks and we're
Right.
not lawyers, but we can say, look, we can get that information for you, and it exists. We don't have to have a conversation purely based on emotional appeals. We can talk about
And some of the facts are that it used to be 93, but just this year the number went up. 96 people every day in this country are killed by gun violence. The majority of those are suicides, and having a gun present increases the chance of a suicide being successful. And also a mass shooting is defined as 4 or more people killed. So really there are mass shootings every day in this country, and they're domestic violence situations. And it's a problem with the solution. Not entirely, but that's the kind of research we pay attention to. When there's a gun present, it's 5 times more likely that the woman, a person in an intimate partner situation, will be killed. And it's mostly
well,
women.
and I think
And-
having that ability to have the research that's really tailored to what you guys are talking about, because every state is a little bit different.
that's right.
Mhm.
And actually, where does Missouri fall on that spectrum of?
It's really interesting because our laws have changed. They've gone sort of, we would say, in the wrong direction in the past 10 years or so. And so the data around gun violence in our state is measurably going up. As Katie mentioned, the rates of homicides just in St. Louis County after permitless carry was enacted, it was remarkable. And these are numbers that we get from law enforcement sources, right? We're not coming with our own survey data. This is law enforcement data. So there was actually a really interesting article, I think, in 2015 in the New York Times comparing Missouri as a state where we've been loosening our gun laws with Connecticut, where as a state after Newtown, they've been tightening their gun laws. And it's really sort of, the lines are crossing and the intersections are remarkable. So, I mean, there are resources out there that we share with lawmakers, that we share at our meetings, that we talk about with volunteers to sort of educate ourselves about this issue, because it does seem, people come to this issue, I will say, people come to moms, they find us because for a long time, whether they're personally affected by the issue or not, they felt like this is an issue where there's just nothing that can be done.
Right.
People
Yeah.
throw up their hands and they feel like we're defeated by this issue and there's nothing that can happen because of the Second Amendment, because of just the sheer numbers of...
And the discourse in the country,
Right.
right? That some
right.
words are so polarizing, and
So when we
the
can...
idea that you're coming for somebody's guns.
Right.
I think we forgot to mention at the very beginning that we're a nonpartisan organization.
Right.
So we have Democrats and Republicans who are members of MOMS, and we're also supporters of the Second Amendment. We fully support the U.S. Constitution, and we have members who own guns, but what we're about is responsible gun ownership and safe storage and laws that protect people and keeping guns out of the hands of people who really shouldn't have them.
Right.
And I think, so the idea that, nothing can be done, or I have a very rigid position,
Right.
that makes a lot of sense to me, but how did you end up deciding to get involved in this group?
Right, it's a great question. I found out about moms through social media because they're so good at sharing this information, that there are ways to tackle this problem that are proven and evidence-based, but I didn't really realize that it could be done here in Missouri and how much needed to be done until I met some moms from St. Louis who came to Columbia in 2015. I went to their meeting and had sort of an aha moment and realized I could do this on social media. I could follow them on Facebook, but really what's happening in our state is it hit close to home. I'm part of a university family. I live in a university town, and what they were describing with the sort of scaling back of our gun safety laws and what that would mean to our campus community, to my husband, to all of my friends who work at Mizzou, really frightened me. And I realized I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. And, I've got two young kids. They're older now, but I've got two boys who, whenever these horrific public tragedies occur, my youngest son was the same age as those kids in Sandy Hook, and so I look at them and I have to tell them. I feel like I have to do this because I have to be able to tell them that somebody's trying to do something to make this stop, and to look in your kids in the eye and say, that your government's not doing anything to make sure that this doesn't happen again or in our community. I just sort of hit a wall and had enough. So we started the local group in 2015, and I started first with my own sort of social circle in the university community, and it resonated because guns on campus is a terrifying proposition in our community. I mean, we've seen how it's working in other states. It leads to just unacceptable levels of risk for students, for faculty, accidents that shouldn't be happening, and we can't let that happen here. So that's how I started the group, and I got Katie involved.
How did you get involved, Katie?
So Kristin and I knew each other socially. I came a little bit later to the organization, but I just sort of had the same feeling. You can't give up on something like this. Shannon Watts talks about after Sandy Hook and the legislature in the country didn't act on enacting legislation that would make people safer and putting in place some laws that would help with gun violence prevention. And I just felt like, where are the grown-ups and when are they going to show up? Somebody has got to be working on this issue, and it's a real nerve because we're 5 million strong. I also have a personal belief that moms are the people who are going to change the world. I think we volunteer in our kids' schools. We're the ones who care about safety, and I'm using the euphemism of moms, parents, people who care about children and safety, and we're a university family also. My husband teaches, and my son just graduated recently, but at one point all four of us were on a college campus, and it's you want to feel safe where you work, and you want to feel safe where you go to church, where you worship, and you want to feel safe in a movie theater, and you want to feel safe at an outdoor concert someplace like Las Vegas, and we're just not in this country. And every other country seems to have been able to address the problem, but we've just got a lobby that's just really strong, and started work before we did.
Right.
On getting to legislatures and individuals, and you just can't give up. There's a lot of momentum in the past couple months.
And when you stand alongside the people like Shannon, but also Lucy McBath, and the leader of the Missouri chapter, a woman named Becky Morgan, is a survivor of gun violence. And when you volunteer and start doing this kind of work alongside survivors, people who've experienced this personally and are using their stories and their strength to make change, I can't even describe how powerful it is to stand shoulder to shoulder. I feel like it's been an incredible experience for me, and super powerful for everyone involved in our local group. I know they feel the same.
Well, and it seems like perhaps at the beginning you felt like what you described, where nothing can be done, but I want to try to do something. But now you've been at it for a little while.
Yep.
So how do you feel now about it? I mean, and you mentioned there seems like in the past few months a little bit of momentum. So do you feel like you're been making progress? You're about to make a lot of progress? How do you feel?
It's another good question, because I think it does go up and down around the country. So on the national stage, things are looking good, and there's been a shift. Missouri's just a tough place. There's a real gun culture in the state of Missouri, which we respect, and people who hunt and keep guns for protection safely. That's a sort of a time-honored thing, and we want to respect that. But at the same time, we just, as Shannon says, we don't have to live like this, where you wake up and it's Parkland, and those kids have just been heartbreaking to watch on TV and social media. And they're another group who sort of stood up and said,
Yes.
Wait, this isn't right. Where are the we're the kids here. We're the people who are supposed to protect us, and the people who are supposed to protect them aren't doing it.
We have in Columbia 2 local Students Demand Action groups started already, and there's a third forming, and one of my sons is involved. And it is the most powerful thing. And one of the things that gives me the most hope is to stand alongside those student activists, because they, unlike us, they've grown up in this world of intruder drills and imagining what will happen when your teacher is trying to protect you in the classroom with a stapler, practicing their own active shooter situation.
Yeah,
it's ghastly, and to stand alongside those activists gives me so much hope. They're amazing. I'm so proud of our students in Missouri. But I would say the other thing that gives me hope is the way that this group has grown so quickly just in the time that I've been involved, but especially even just since last year. I do think there's reason to hope.
In Missouri or in general, or both?
Nationally, but both. Yeah. In Missouri, we went from having 7 local groups, mainly in our larger cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, and Columbia. And after Parkland, the Parkland shooting in Florida, we've expanded now to 18 local groups. And we are everywhere, from Cass County to Cape Girardeau.
St. Joe, which is a big
Rolla,
one
just
for
as
us.
our newest group.
Yeah.
So what we're doing, our work, this movement is everywhere. And so what's really exciting is to think about going into this legislative session with volunteers who have organized on this issue and are ready to talk and are ready to meet with lawmakers who are from St. Joe, who are from those districts, and can talk about what it means to them as rural gun owners, many of them, and as rural voters, and speak to the issue from their own communities. That's going to make the difference in a state like ours, I think, is
Right.
hearing from those rural
So,
moms.
we go into offices in Jefferson City and introduce ourselves. We're your constituents, we're the
Right.
people who elected you and you're supposed to represent us, and this is how I feel about gun violence prevention. And it's, they've got to look you in the eye.
Right.
And do you have gun owners that are part of the group?
Yep, we do. Last year, I had an excellent group of volunteers to go to our annual advocacy day. Excuse me. We break up into small groups. We take volunteers with us. Some of us have done it before. Some volunteers are brand new. And last year, I got to go talk to lawmakers with a bunch of volunteers from the Cape Girardeau area, including a retired sheriff who, talk about opening doors. That was an interesting conversation to have a law enforcement voice with our organization. And that's who we are. There were men and women in my group. There were students and older parents like me, grandparents. And
We have a lot of teachers,
Yeah.
people who care about school safety. And
people who could speak to this issue from multiple points of view. So we're just going to keep doing that until we can sort of change the conversation, I think, a little bit more. What we're hoping for this year really is to have more conversations on both sides of the aisle. As Katie mentioned, we are a nonpartisan organization open to anyone. We have people in leadership who do not identify as Democrat or Republican, who are, on different places on other issues. But we really feel like it's a strength that we can talk about this from a very common sense point of view.
Well, and it sounds, both sides of the aisle is also like produce and frozen foods, because it sounds like you talk about this a lot, right?
Sure.
You bump into people and everybody wants
We
to talk
do,
about it.
yeah. Katie and I both are big fans of wearing a pin or a shirt. I have a trusty tote bag that I carry with me everywhere, and people will stop and ask, or they say thank you, and they say, "What are you doing? I've been meaning to find out more about how to get involved, and I see you guys are doing so many things." We're big users of social media, so we kind of are seen on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and people see what we're doing. And that's the idea, is to say, you don't have to do quite as much as we're doing to get involved, but you can make a difference if you even just participate via social media, or even if you just, write one email to your representative, a carefully chosen action with us, that we've timed and we've thought about, and we sort of help people organize, can really make a huge difference when it comes to fighting these terrible pieces of legislation.
All right, well, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
But before we go,
Yes.
how about if you talk a little bit about how people who might want to get involved could get involved in the coming week and the coming month
Okay.
and beyond that?
Sure. Well, the first thing you can do is we would love you at our monthly meetings. We meet on the third Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock, and Calvary Episcopal Church in downtown Columbia graciously opens their doors to us. So we meet there every month. Everyone is welcome.
At 7 o'clock?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, third Thursday.
Third Thursday.
And about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
There are cookies.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Water.
Water. Okay, good. All right.
Bling. We
Yeah.
can get you
Kids-
bracelets,
Yes. No,
t-shirts,
children are welcome.
pins.
We always
Kids are
have
welcome.
kids in the church. Yeah, it's
Okay.
we respect people's time. We're always offering people things they can do too at our meetings. We inform people and share what we're working on a state and national level, but we also offer calls to action. So it's worthwhile hour.
All right.
And something else I forgot to mention, that we do like to be proactive, and another important thing that Moms is part of is a Be Smart campaign. So we try to educate people about safe gun storage, which in Missouri turns out to be a huge issue. And so we will go to health fairs and trick or trunk, whatever that thing you do out of your cars on Halloween is. But sort of any organization, health fair type place that wants to have us, and we have people who are trained in Be Smart, and it's just about, asking questions, storing guns responsibly, modeling good behavior, telling grown-ups if you see something, because unfortunately Missouri is also a terrible state. We're number 2 in the country for toddler shootings, and it's people who don't store their guns responsibly, and that's just a problem with the solution, and we just provide provide education on that. And oftentimes we'll give out free gun locks to people
Yep.
also. So, and it's a good entry point for teachers and for people who aren't sure they want to get involved in the nitty-gritty of legislative work. But to be a Be Smart trainer, you can go talk to anybody anytime.
We also do outreach to survivor communities. We do, as Katie's mentioning, educational work. Our meetings often also include, legislative options. We do things both on the state and national level. Unfortunately, we don't do a lot with local policy, but we often talk a lot and strategize around ways to help our local community on the issue. So there are lots of different avenues for talking about gun violence prevention through moms, both at our meetings, also on our social media. We started on Facebook. We do a lot on Facebook. We have a state page. I would encourage everybody, if they don't have time to do anything else, to follow us on Facebook at Moms Demand Action -Mo is our public page, and follow us on Twitter if you like Twitter. We're big on Twitter.
What's your handle?
My personal, I would follow at Moms Demand. That's our national handle,
Okay.
and you'll see us there.
Get lots of good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually Shannon's a very clever person to follow too. She's a lot
Shannon
of fun.
Watts, yes, follow
Oh,
Shannon
great.
Watts.
Yep.
The other big thing we can't leave without mentioning, we would love for everyone who's interested in this work to come with us to Advocacy Day, which is our big annual event in Jefferson City.
It's going to be is it Tuesday,
February
19th.
19th. Mm-hmm.
From 11 to 2, and there'll be several hundred people from all around Missouri sort of descending on the Capitol and
Yeah.
sharing information with legislators and just showing how strong we are as a
Believe
state
it or not,
organization.
as a state, we're one of the largest chapters in the country. We are very, our last year's Advocacy Day, I think we had over 400 people attend.
Wow.
So it's an incredible experience to be part of this movement, and in that way, to be in a ballroom at the hotel when we gather to take a big group photo and we can all barely fit
We
into
hold
the
up our-
ballroom
hold
together.
up our huge moms
And then we
letters.
fan out. We give people training and we fan out and we talk to lawmakers, and it's an incredible experience. It's empowering. It's important. I mean, I think people leave knowing that they've really done something and made a difference on the issue, because we pair people with their own lawmakers. It's extremely a big deal to organize, but it's a really, really rewarding day, and it's
Yeah.
annually.
And it's, public face it. We're just moms
Yes.
like everybody else, working to make our country safer.
We're volunteers.
Great. All right. Well, I think we're out of time for this month. So thank you, Kristin. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
And
League
good
of
luck
Women
in
Voters.
February.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we'll see you next month. Thanks.